Doom, doom, doom.
Ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. That's how that goes.
All right, our last and final presenter today, Dr. Carolyn Spears from Wichita State, and many of you know her. She's been all over the place presenting all kinds of great information in the accessibility field. She's been dazzling us with her knowledge for several months now. And those of you that heard her speak, she does her homework. She knows what she's talking about. And so we're lucky to have her here to talk about assistive technology and the kinds of things you need to look for as you design your stuff so you know what these technologies can do, which will help you refine what you do in your classroom. So please give her a round of applause, and we'll turn the mic over to her.
Clap first, ask questions later. I think that's how that goes. Hi, I'm sorry that I'm sure you guys are like, oh my gosh, just do this thing. So let's just do this thing. I'm going to go over assistive technologies, just a little bit of a background about why it is that I'm talking about that. As Cliff just said, when we're talking about accessibility, for the most part, we are not talking about accommodations. We are not talking about the things we do for the individual. We're talking about things we do for populations. I have a slide on that, and I'll go over that in a minute. But regardless of when we make these choices, what group of people we're trying to address, whether it is for populations or for individuals, ultimately we need what we're doing to mesh with the ways that different folks are interfacing with the world. Many times people use assistive technologies. They use assistive technologies for a number of different reasons, not all of them having to do with like the digital world or educational world, but the assistive technologies have certain expectations, certain standards that things kind of need to be addressed to. So we're going to go over assistive technologies a little bit kind of in general, and also what it is about any particular group of people or technology that needs particular choices made. So that's the whole reason that I'm here. I don't think I have an hour. I will say that at the end, or let's do questions this way. If we have any questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to just go ahead and wave me down while I'm talking. You're not gonna, I went to school on a theater scholarship. You're not gonna get me off my goal. So I wanna, if you have a question, let's address those at the time that you have them. And it may be that I say, oh, let's do that at the end, but probably not. So, but second, I am, as Crystal Eiseminger just pointed out, the certified professional in accessibility, and I do this all the time. I talk about lots of different types of topics. So now at the end of your day, if you have a question that is persistent across a number of different speakers, or something that you didn't feel like you didn't understand an answer, you want to hear an answer again or something, feel free to ask me. We can go across the whole wide spectrum of accessibility questions, and I'm happy to address those. So let's do those at the end. Does that make sense? So topical questions as we go, additional questions at the end. I'm happy to do that. I will say I heard a question in the last presentation I just want to address real quick. If you're dealing with, so this is back from the last topic, if you're dealing with a video that is housed somewhere but you are not the owner, this comes up a lot with YouTube videos, of course. You can use a service called KeepVid, K-E-E-P-V-I-D, KeepVid, which is a free service to strip out a video from YouTube, whether or not you're the owner. So you can take it out, put it back up on YouTube, turn on automatic captions, and then go into the YouTube's caption editor and edit those captions there. So it is possible to pretty easily strip a video out and do it in a way that is legal. So KeepVid also, although I've never used it, I know I've heard a number of times that the Firefox browser has a similar tool built into it. If you're a Firefox person and comfortable with kind of looking around, you might take a look at that, but I don't have any specific knowledge about how that works. But I know KeepVid works, it works really well, and that's what we do if we're not the owner of something. So that, I heard that earlier, it was like, I've got to say something. All right, so this is me, Carolyn Spear, I'm from Wichita State. Today, so we're going to talk about, really briefly, the distinction between accessibility and accommodation. I just want to go over that, even if you have, just to make sure that you understand where assistive technology kind of fits in that space. And then we'll talk about what assistive technology is, myths and misconceptions about it. And then specifically, we're going to talk about AT for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and AT for people who are blind or low vision. Those two kinds of AT are the sorts of things that we are preparing for the most part. There are other kinds of assistive technologies, particularly to deal with motor control, gross and fine. We aren't going to talk about those today, beyond the fact that we're going to talk a little bit about keyboard interaction. We're going to talk about Windows-based stuff and Mac-based stuff, and then AT on the iPhone. I have found that you need to not, I have been trained out the ears on Android devices, and I still can't tell you how those things work. I think you need somebody who has an Android device to talk to you about your Android device if that's what you have. I have an iPhone, I'm just much more comfortable with it, so I don't want to presume to talk about AT on Android. Okay, so really quickly, accessibility versus accommodations, as I talked about earlier. When we use the word accessibility, primarily what we are saying is the stuff you do ahead of time to prepare for populations. This is not stuff we do because we happen to have somebody with a particular need in our class. This is stuff we're doing ahead of time to help prepare for the eventuality of having everybody in our class. So what we like to say is ultimately we're looking for, in the division of labor, about 80% of the labor done ahead of time, 80% of the labor sort of accounted for in accessibility, and about 20% of the labor accounted for in accommodations. So we are, all of us, taking on shouldering a little bit of the burden that what historically speaking in higher ed was given to disability services. And we're doing that for lots of reasons, the law not being the only one, there are lots of reasons, but also to help to improve the speed of accommodations once somebody gets to disability services. So there are a lot of reasons, but the law and improving speed are both there. So accessibility, like I said, we're creating accessible content, we're building accessible websites, we're doing this in advance before we get any kind of complaint, and with luck, then everybody will just have a good experience and we won't have complaints. We will serve our students and our populations, our staff, our faculty, and others well, and we won't get somebody saying something. Accommodations, on the other hand, are always going to be required for maybe particular people or people with particular impairments or disabilities. So accessibility is for the individual, and we will always see that tailored to an individual person. So accommodations are not generally generalizable beyond the individual. So those are the definitions that we're sort of working with today. So, assistive technologies. Assistive technologies are defined federally because they're paid for federally sometimes. And so because they are, depending upon the age of someone, the nature of the impairment, the nature of the technology, and other things, they might be paid for by a government office or at some time paid for by a government office. So it's very strictly defined. I want to get the strict definition and make sure we understand that and recognize then that we're going to talk about it just a little bit softer, a little bit more broadly. So assistive technologies are divided into devices and services. Devices are, as I have a quotation here on my slide, any item, piece of equipment, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. Services then are anybody who's assisting using those devices, selecting them, acquiring them, or using them specifically. That is an assistive technology service. So both of those things are very strictly and narrowly defined by the federal government, and both of those things here we'll talk about in a little bit broader perspective. But I think it's important to recognize that assistive technology is also a service. So it's typically associated with people who have impairments or disabilities, but can be used by anyone to improve function. So it kind of depends on where you are, if we think about the federal or the sort of functional definitions and the differences between impairment, this is at the bottom of the slide here, impairment, disability, and handicap, the distinctions there are legal, those are legal terms. But if we think about somebody who might have an impairment, then you say, well, does this impairment disable you? Are you not able to do something that you would be able to if you have this impairment? And is this disability then, is this something that is imposed upon you from the outside, something that could be mitigated if the world were structured differently, if the event were structured differently? So this is kind of a spectrum, but on, you know, just from the point of view of impairment, I think everybody walks around with some impairments, right? I don't have my glasses on right now because I love to present, but I don't really like to see the individual people. Like I can see you, I see that there are people here, I'm not that bad, but you know, it's if I see you super clearly and maybe somebody is like listening with a frowny face or something, that's upsetting, and so I just don't wear my glasses, but I have a visual impairment. Is it a disability for me? It is not. So, and if you have a hand up or wave or something, I can see that too. I just want you to know that. And I can see you pass notes to your neighbor. None of that. No, I can't actually, so just go ahead. Anyway, any of us could, at a given time in our lives, a given time in the day, have an impairment. I'll often say something like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry I sent you that email before my coffee, you know, so maybe I'm impaired by my lack of sleep or my lack of coffee. So that the definition of impairment actually is really soft, and there are a lot of assistive technologies that fit right there in our lives that are available to you right now. So let's look at them. They can be organized by task. We don't want to spend too much time thinking about this because most of these are non-educational purposes, but I just want to give you an idea that assistive technology is this huge spectrum, right? So assistive technologies, as we have this, seating and positioning, things for daily living, things to control your environment or improve your mobility. Assistive listening technologies do come up in an educational environment all the time. Visual aids, augmentative communication. There's lots of, maybe you have an array of pictures and you point to pictures on a board, and you might have a thing that speaks out that word. There are lots of different kinds of ways to augment communication. And then lots of things to assist with reading, writing, and computers. And for the most part, for AT in an educational environment, that's where we're talking about. AT and those things. Visual aids, some too, and some of the others. So myths and misconceptions about assistive technology. I don't like the word technology. My office used to be called Instructional Design and Technology, and people would always say to us, oh yeah, you're like the tech people. It's like, oh my gosh, no, we're not. So we finally took the word tech out of our office's name. So I don't like the word technology, but I think most of our myths about AT come from that word. Just because we call it technology doesn't mean it's technological. Anybody in here who teaches history knows that the history of technology was, you know, non-digital until about 3.5 minutes ago in the span of history. Technological advances aren't necessarily digital technology. They're not even necessarily what we would call technology. There's a whole spectrum. The ones that are digital technologies, many people believe are complicated, something I can't possibly understand, and that's just not true. You have on your devices, if you have updated software, you have a lot of assistive technology help in your software right now, right in front of you. And if you were to go home tonight, because we're nerds and it's Friday night, and so what else are we going to do but play with our computers? Then you could figure by tomorrow morning, you could be talking to your computer and having it go places, or doing emails without having to type with your hands. These technologies are not necessarily complicated. Some of them are, but increasingly the user interface for all technology, digital technology, is improving, and that's true in AT as well. A big myth, and I hear this regularly from faculty especially, is that people with the same disability will necessarily use the same assistive technology. Why would that be? If you think about any group of people, like an English department. You know, within an English department, people are going to prefer different software. They're going to prefer, one might be a Mac person, one might be a Dell PC person or something like that. We see all of this variety in the kinds of tools and tricks and stuff that we use across the human population. Why would assistive technology be any different? And in fact, this kind of comes down to accommodations. What people need is very individual and has less to do with their impairment than lots of other things associated with their impairment being a consideration, but not the only one. And so as a consequence, not all people with the same disability or impairment use the same assistive technologies. And assistive technology is not cheating. It is not cheating to use the things to help you, you know, like when we walk in this building here and go to open the incredibly heavy door, and it sort of it catches itself and starts to open itself with you as you're pulling. That's an assistive technology. That's not cheating. That gets the door open. So we're trying to make sure that doors that are open for everybody else are open for people who are using assistive technologies. And the assistive technology may be the thing that's helping them open the door. Okie dokie. So assistive technology for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. There's a pretty big group of students who have some kind of hearing issue, starting from something that's mild hearing issues, maybe, you know, whatever I'm over 50 now, so I can't hear those tones, the really high tones, right? So that's a level of hearing loss that might impact my ability to learn something, depending upon what it is, all the way to profound deafness. And when someone becomes deaf or hard of hearing in their lifespan also is really important and very much impacts what assistive technology they use. They might use something pretty technical and devicey like a hearing aid or cochlear implant. Those things are obviously worn on or in the body and are very individual to the human being. But they could have assistive listening devices. I don't know what kind of systems are on this campus, but FM listening devices and infrared listening devices are very common in higher education classroom experiences because you can define a room with them pretty well. FM is cheaper, and infrared you can define a room better. It's not important that you know the difference between these things, but it is important that you understand that that there's this whole spectrum of difference in these kinds of sort of higher end assistive technologies. Then we have things like captions. Captions themselves aren't an assistive technology, but all of the stuff that we've been talking about to this point to support the creation and the display of captions is. So, you know, a tool like Amara would have an assistive technology component. Any kind of player that allows for captions to show up, allows you maybe to change what the captions look like, then that's going to be an assistive technology component. Then we have CART, which is real-time. The RT in there is real-time captioning. CART is becoming much more important in our environment than it used to be. I get this question a lot. If we have to have our videos captioned in my online class, then are we someday going to have to be captioned when we lecture live? No, we don't have to do that yet. The technology wouldn't support that. But if we are accommodating someone with hearing loss, we may find that they do need real-time captioning. It's possible that that could be something that someone would need for an accommodation. So real-time captioning would take the place of probably someone who is signing in ASL, which is a similar kind of thing to real-time captioning, right? Does that make sense? So that's CART. CART is also important if you're streaming live events. In higher ed, we'd stream live events with some regularity. And if we're streaming live events, then we're looking at a service like CART. That would, by the way, be sort of required if you have an undefined population. You don't know who's going to be watching your event. Like, for example, a sporting event or commencement. If we're doing real-time streaming of that, then we probably need real-time captioning of that too. And that's going to be done with CART. And then, of course, note takers, and that's kind of old school, right? That goes back. We've had note takers in our classes for a really long time. And that illustrates very well that not all AT is technological in that way. I already mentioned sign language interpreting. I just got done a couple of weeks ago talking to folks out in Colby, and we were talking about this very issue, and they said, well, what do we do if we get a sign language request for a sign language person, because we actually don't have anybody in our community? Well, you can do sign language interpreting remotely. You can get someone who's watching, there on Zoom or some other platform like that, who can provide interpretation with interpreting services over a video line like that. So it can be in-person or remote. Visual alerting systems are good, like if you set up on your phone to flash instead of buzz when it rings, that would be an example of that. Or if you've been in a hotel that has a doorbell and it has a flashing light on the inside, then that's an example of an AT device that has a visual alerting component. But for you guys, I think it's most important to think about the things that you can do in your presentation that help to improve or optimize someone's experience if they happen to be using assistive technologies. So that would be things like in the topic of deaf or hard of hearing, making sure that you have someone's attention. So if they are wearing some sort of device, a hearing aid or an assistive listening device, they're going to get a lot of possible sound input into that. Making sure that you have their attention when you talk to them so they can focus on you will allow them then to experience that using the assistive technology better. Or if they happen to use lip reading and they don't use a digital device, then obviously then that's helpful too. So that's an important presentation component. Directly facing someone, not covering your mouth. I have a number of friends who will do that. Like they won't when they're presenting probably do that, but my boss, John, does this all the time. It's like, dude, don't cover your mouth when you're talking to me. I'm not hard of hearing, and yet I find that challenging to sort of follow what somebody's doing. So getting out of the habit of doing that is good if you do it. We saw this really well illustrated earlier. If you're in a group, especially if it's a room that requires a microphone, first off, use the microphone. Don't be the person who stands in the front of the room and says, oh, I'm always really loud and everybody can hear me. No, the microphone's in there, almost certainly for a legal reason. Use the microphone. And then if you have a group of people and they want to make comments or questions and they don't have a microphone, then repeating the comment or question back to the group using the microphone not only will allow everyone across the spectrum of hearing to hear you, but also if someone's using an assistive device, they may be relying on that microphone for the feed for their assistive device. So it's important. You're not going to be loud enough to be heard through the device if you're not speaking into a microphone. So it's important that somebody says the question through a microphone. And that's good for everybody. And then, of course, don't call a person out in front of other people. And I see this pretty regularly when I go and listen to people present. They'll say, oh, oh, that's right, Dave, I forgot, you can't really hear me. Did you hear that? In an attempt to try to support someone's experience, we can inadvertently also really not support their experience, right? So not calling someone out, but instead having good habits, using the technologies or the services available to you or provided in your room, and maybe privately speaking to someone, am I doing everything I need to do to make sure that that your learning is what it needs to be, but not in front of a group of people. And it's surprising how often that happens. I know better than to point this at the screen, but it worked anyway. So AT for people who have low vision or blindness. We talked a lot about that at Wichita State because, as I think probably everyone knows, but if you don't, Wichita State has an agreement with the National Federation of the Blind. Our agreement is on the very tip-top cutting edge of what's going on in accessibility law for people who are low vision and blind in the country. So we are actually with the metaphorical machetes cutting down the metaphorical brush as we blaze a new path for this group of people, particularly in all kinds of services. So this is something that we know a lot about. This is also pretty expensive. A lot of the stuff is costly. So we're also trying to work as a university to see if we can improve efficiencies and bring down cost. So like with hearing, obviously visual impairment is across a spectrum, from a mild impairment to someone who is blind, including, of course, people who are colorblind. And fun fact, not everybody who's colorblind knows they're colorblind. So it makes it all the more difficult to provide services to them. So we just assume that everybody is colorblind. And if you do that in your creation of your materials, then you're not going to go wrong, right? You're not going to put somebody in a position where they're not going to get information that they need. AT can range in this group from the very simple reality that sometimes just all you need is large print or larger print. As I've gotten older, I have noticed that print has gotten smaller. I don't know what's going on with that. And that's because you have just this natural degradation of vision over time. Just larger print works for a lot of people. But being able to provide something in larger print means that you need to create it in a way so that it can be made larger. It's not a handwritten document, as an example. It is a digital document where text is recognized. So this large print thing, there's a lot there that training can go to sort of make that possible. Video magnifiers also obviously will help with that. Anything that can be created digitally is subject to a process called optical character recognition. If you have maybe a photocopy of a book chapter that you like people to read, you've just always really liked that, maybe a short story for English professors, or maybe a really cool, first-person account of some event for history professors or something like that, it's probably fine. We're probably not under attack. It's okay, probably. So you have this book chapter, and you've been handing it out as a paper document all this time. I can, or Cliff's team can, have Crystal do it. She knows how to do it. Can take that document and put it into a digital format, but then it has to go through optical character recognition. The computer basically turns this photograph into words. So that is something that would be assistive of assistive technology. Braille, of course. We're not under attack, right? Is it more than one person who's getting that alert? Is it a thing we need to know? Oh, it's the Amber Alert. Okay, so Braille obviously there are all kinds of devices to support Braille. Tactile graphics, which are actually taking pictures, things like graphs or photographs, things from anatomy and physiology maybe, turning them into simplified pictures that can then be printed in a way that is raised. All of that is stuff that can happen to the things you are creating. So the more accessible the things you create are, the easier it is to create these final products, the quicker it is to create these final products. Audio formats and screen readers kind of go together. The computer is figuring out what this says and reading it out loud, whether it's through an audio format or it's in real time through a screen reader. The computer can't figure it out if you don't tell it it's a word. So again, it's in the creation of the document that will support the use of these technologies. WSU Tech and WSU Main Campus, is that how we're supposed to say that? Trish, do you know? I don't know. I hate Main Campus because it sounds othering, but I don't know. All of the WSU universe has now a assistive technology called Ally that lives inside of our Blackboard environment. Those of you who have come from other schools may have access to Ally as well. And it can live in other LMSs as well. And it will take a document that you put in there, and it will create an audio version for all of your students. Now think of all of the students that that could support, not just somebody who's blind necessarily, but you know, a parent who drives from Augusta to the west side of Wichita 3 times a week or something, you know, people who are in their car a lot, taking documents that they need to consume for school and making them audio so that they can listen to them while they drive or do something else. Lots of people that can assist. But if we aren't creating those documents correctly in the first place, those assistive technologies aren't going to work because it's just going to be garbly. Remember when I first took my first computer class, it was in high school in the early 1980s, and they gave me the garbage in, garbage out thing, which is, I think, the most persistent of all computer terms. So if we aren't putting good, strong documents in, they aren't going to get good audio formats out of that. And they're going to start to complain as they rely on it. Screen readers, same thing. If it can't understand that it's text, it's not going to read it properly. And that opens you up to lawsuits. On your Windows PC, you have a whole bunch of AT available to you. And if you have updated software, then these are available to you right now. If they aren't available to you right now, if you're using something from your institution and it's not updated, if you need help, you can probably contact your ITS. I know at WSU you could contact ITS at Tech. They could help with that too, IT. We're going to figure out whether it's IT or ITS over time, in the fullness of time. But it's IT or ITS. But they can help get updated software on your machine. You will know if your software is not updated if these things aren't on there. So on your PC, if you go to settings and you can get to ease of access, or control panel, get to ease of access, or you can just search for ease of access. You're going to find a whole bunch of things available to you. You'll be able to enlarge and enhance screen elements, which is really nice for me personally. My PC is just a Surface, it's small, and that's just quick for me because it's a keystroke. You can read the screen with narrator, and you can control your computer with voice. But above all, you can dictate into your computer from anywhere that you're writing in a text box. So if you have an LMS and you want to just read in your announcements, or you have emails you want to answer, or anything, and you just want to do it verbally because your hands are tired, it's the end of the day, or it's a long thing, or whatever, then you can just dictate it into your machine. You do have to have a microphone. If you don't have a microphone on your machine, you'll need to plug one in. But here's a fun little piece of information for you. If you have a smartphone which has earbuds and a microphone, you can always use that as a microphone with your computer. Just plug it into your computer, go and it will probably automatically recognize that you did that. Otherwise, you will need to go to your audio settings and say, yes, I would like this for my audio input and my audio output. And that little microphone, those are really good microphones. So you don't have to like hold it and talk to it, like just let it hang. It was designed to do that, and that will work really well. So if you don't have a microphone on board with your machine, you can use that. And it's great. You can speak the punctuation. I really like the Windows one, even better than the Mac one, although I'm a Mac person. The Windows one, it should, as you're doing this, it will type and you can see it type as you talk. Don't freak out that it says things wrong, because it's going to continue to listen to you as you talk, and it's going to figure out the context. And it will go back later, sometimes sentences later, and change words for you. You can speak in, just like with a text, you can speak in punctuation. And it may, at first, write comma, period, whatever, you know, as words. But over time, it's going to figure out, oh, those are punctuation marks, and it's going to go back and change that. So it's pretty cool. It's really very nicely done. Speak clearly, you know, slowly and succinctly, you know, clearly, whatever. Speak, enunciate, thank you. Enunciate. and that will help also. It's not dynamic. It's not like Dragon Naturally Speaking that will listen to you, you can train it, that will compensate over time for an accent, figure out what you're saying in the accent in which you speak. It's not like that yet, but it is free and it is on your machine right this minute. Or if it's not, it should be, and you just need to update your software. So these are really useful in any Microsoft application and many, many web applications, including Blackboard. I did go and test it in Blackboard just to make sure. So definitely save your hands. Mac AT, onboard AT is very similar. I like it a lot. I am a Mac person. We are bilingual in our shop. We have one of each device so that whoever walks in our door, we can help them. But I do tend toward, I speak in Mac as my primary language. And it's very good. The accessibility features are found in the system preferences. Now I want to point out the word accessibility here. They call them accessibility features. These are assistive technologies. So again, we're kind of softening up some of our words to kind of fit it, you know. But accessibility is how a lot of this is just shorthanded. So go to the system preferences. You'll see the little accessibility guy, right? He sits there, here, sorry. You'll see the little accessibility guy. Is that guy? It's like 3 lines down on the right on mine. I don't know if that's where it is. That's where it is on mine. And from there, you can do all kinds of things. You can change the display colors. You can invert colors. You can put on different filters if you are colorblind to help to mitigate people who are putting color coding in. It helps to communicate that color coding to you, depending upon the type of color blindness you have. It'll go to grayscale, so all kinds of cool things. You can turn on Zoom tools. You can enable voiceover, which it'll read back your screen. You can play video descriptions. You can dictate into your machine also. It's just a little microphone. You just turn that guy on. You can change how subtitles look, which I actually just love. I was playing around with this before I came to talk to you guys. I never had looked at this. And you can change the background of subtitles, background color. You can put a band behind the subtitles so that it doesn't wash out. You know how subtitles sometimes, depending upon what's on the screen, all of a sudden you can't read half of them because it's white. Maybe now somebody has a white t-shirt on or something. You can put a band behind it. So there are lots of things that are available for you to use also on your Mac. Like with your Mac, your iPhone has similar things. These are all also called accessibility settings. Under settings in general, then you can go to accessibility. And it also has a screen reader, which is cool. When we test for different kinds of screen reader capability things, I try to remember to bring it up on my iPhone and check it there, although my Mac and my iPhone typically are the same. But it's a good place to check things. It has zoom, which allows you to zoom in what's on the screen, but it also has magnification. So like if you're at a restaurant and you have a menu in front of you and the text seems very small, you can use magnification. It uses the camera to look at the word, and then it'll allow you to make it really big so that you can see it big right there on your screen. It'll magnify it. So zoom is the stuff that's in the computer land. Magnification is stuff in the real world, but you're using the same device to make it bigger. Lots of display accommodations, lots of color changing, just like with a Mac, reducing color intensity, reducing light intensity, changing the color of the underlying light behind it, like with night shift and other kinds of things. And you can change your text. So on my phone, I have my text is larger than average, and it's also bold. When I hand my phone to people to like do something, they're like, "Whoa, what's wrong with your phone? It's like great big," and I'm just completely used to it. It doesn't look big to me. It looks normal, and also I can read it, right? So I'm using my assistive technology to offset an impairment that I have because I am older, so that it doesn't become a disability in my lived experience. All of that, though, relies on the quality of the underlying document, the quality of the underlying web page. The more accessible choices we make as we create those things, then the more optimized those technologies are going to be for the end user. So that's why we talk about things like using your styles and bullet tools and tabs and stuff when you create Word documents, identifying in a table, identifying what the headers are for each of the columns, the titles are. When we do that, then the assistive technologies that come after us understand what's going on and can explain what's there to someone who maybe can't see it or has some sort of impairment that interferes with their ability to just look at that document as it's displayed on the screen. So continue to make those choices, and these assistive technologies will continue to get better too. And over time, we should probably be meeting here pretty soon. Earlier, Trish said about, with regard to captions, she said, yeah, you'll notice that that's our thing, our last thing on our list. We're hoping to get that done by 2020. And when she came over, I said, yeah, maybe by 2020, then our automatic captioning services will be good enough. We don't really need to worry about it. And she's like, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So these assistive technologies are really getting much better really quickly, especially the digital ones. But the better we are at creating our documents and other content, the easier it is for them to work regardless. So points to take away. There is a distinction between accessibility and accommodations. Keep that in mind. For the most part, really, we are training on accessibility, not on accommodations. Assistive technology does live largely on the accommodations side, but not entirely. Some accessibility choices, like I said, can help people optimize their AT. And some AT is linked with accommodations primarily. AT can be a device or a service. I like that point because it reminds me that I am functioning in a world where I can be assistive technology as a human. I like that. Many specific habits will help people who are using AT and others. If there's a microphone, use the microphone, even if you don't want to. We've been training on this now. Every single time I get a group of people together, I've been training on this straight for a year. And I just got done talking to my classroom technology people, and the manager for classroom technology said, I didn't have to replace batteries more in classrooms with microphones this year than any other year, which tells me that people are not using the microphone. So use the microphone. I know you're not my population, but I'm just going to, you're in trouble because they were bad. No. But use your microphone if you have one. It's better for everybody in the classroom, and it does help people with assistive technology optimize that. Use your document editing tools. It will, although there's a learning curve associated with some of those things, once you learn it, it will make document creation faster, easier, more efficient for you, and will create documents that themselves are way better for other people. And AT is available. If you have a device, it almost certainly, of any kind, it almost certainly has some kind of AT component to it. So play around with that. Figure it out, because you're not going to break it, right? And you may find that you are no longer typing your emails, right? And that would be awesome. That is a glorious future that we can all move into now. So cool. That's it. That's all I got for you. What do you got for questions? You just want to clap and go, don't you? You want to clap. Okay. Yes, Casey? Okay, so the question is about real-time, this Casey's question about real-time captioning of voice through a device, through apps. And there are some. I have one. What's the one that I told you about? Ava, right. AVA works pretty well. They have different ones for sort of different situations. Ava's really good for a group if you can get several people to have it, and it will actually then create a transcript that says, Casey said this, and then Carolyn said this, because it's going to listen to all these different devices. Otherwise, in a classroom situation, Ava or something like that would, if you had the phone up here or you had your instructor with the app and a student with the app, then the student could watch real-time captioning. Now, it's machine captioning, so the quality isn't going to be perfect, right? We had one, oh my gosh, this is great. This is it. This is it. This is it. Are there any other questions? Because I have a funny story. Okay. We got a thing in WSU Today. They're like, look at this cool new video. We're really excited at this video. Crystal found this. Yay, Crystal. Yay. So she said, here at Wichita State University, home of Shocker Nation, something, something. And if you read the caption, because they didn't edit the captions, it called us Water Toss University, which I think is our summertime name. And home of Chakra Nation. Chakra Nation is awesome. So that's like our massage name, I think. So we have Chakra Nation and Water Toss University. Check your captions if they are automatic captions and recognize that, yeah, that's about where the technology is. But it could assist someone. It's not going to be their primary way to get information, but it could assist them. Does that answer your question, Casey? Any other questions?
That AVA app is actually in that supplemental document on the Google Drive. So if you look at the article and app document on the Google Drive, it actually lists that in there, and it's free up to a point, and then it's a couple bucks a month. It's really not all that expensive, I think. But that's in there, that particular app is.
And then they have like this professional version, which is like $75 a month or something, some ridiculous thing that you would not need that.
Which Trish is glad to pay for. No?
Nah.
Please give Carolyn a round of applause.
Sorry for the long day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully that you've taken some stuff away from here that you can immediately start to use. I would like my ITAS team to stand up, please, and the presenters. I know people hate to do this, but please stand up. These are the folks that helped put this together, so by all means, yeah, thank you. So again, here in the next week or so, we'll have a video of each session loaded on that Google Drive, or at least a link to it. And there'll be a survey coming out. Help us improve this camp for next year. We're looking to expand and do some neat things next year already, so please give us your feedback. Again, please don't tell us the summer camp was horrible. Give us specifics why it was horrible, because I can fix that. Okay, otherwise you can just tell us how great it was, and I'll love you to death forever. So thank you for coming, especially those that drove so far, even to San Diego. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we go, there is one more person we need to thank. Please thank Cliff Nelson. He did most of this work. Have a great evening, everybody. Drive safe.